Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Outer Sounds. We're here with filmmaker and musician Luke Fowler, who made an excellent film on composer Martin Bartlett called Electro Pythagoras. Bartlett's Anecdotal Electronics LP on Arclight Editions, right here, is the January selection for Outer Sounds. And we're happy to have Luke here with us. How you doing, Luke?
I'm very well. Yeah, nice to see you, Greg.
Yeah, nice to see you too. And thanks for chatting with us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to just chat about was, how did you when and how did you first encounter Martin Bartlett's music? Because he's a pretty obscure or fringe composer that I think a lot of people just don't know about, and but was making really incredible work for a long time.
Yeah, well, my entry point into Martin's oeuvre was in sort of mid 2000. I think it was 2011 or 12, and I was on a residency. Well, I was actually accompanying my partner who was doing a residency at the Western Front in Vancouver.
Yeah,
and I had recently made a sort of suitcase modular synthesizer using Surge modules. And so I brought this instrument with me to play whilst I was having a holiday.
Okay.
And excuse me. When I was we were staying in Hank Bull's apartment, and Hank Bull was one of the not one of the original founding members of the Western Front, but had been sort of like the second generation, and he had inherited Martin's flat after Martin died of AIDS in 1993. He had cared for Martin as he was dying, and it did end up inheriting Martin's flat. So we were actually sitting in Martin's apartment, staying in Martin's apartment with a lot of the same Indian rugs and tables and fittings and fixtures, and had inherited his record collection and a lot of kind of souvenirs and mementos and things like that. So one of the things that Hank immediately picked up on was this synthesizer that I had brought with me. Yeah. And he said that it reminded him of Martin's Black Box.
Yeah.
And I sort of said, oh, well, who's Martin Bartlett and what's the Black Box? And he said, oh, Martin's this, he's an amazing composer, and told me the story of, working with Martin, and they collaborated together in this multimedia project called Canada Shadows, which was sort of like an early audiovisual project that used Super 8 and 16 millimeter and slides and shadows, hand shadow puppets. And inspired by Indonesia, and travels to Indonesia. And so Hank had, seen Martin's and heard Martin's Black Box, which was this custom built analog synthesizer, and made some comparisons between what I was doing and Martin's Black Box, and foisted a CD, the only CD that Martin ever released, which was on the Western Front's label, called Pythagoras' Ghost.
Right.
And that was the CD they released during his lifetime, but then posthumously there was this compilation called Burning Water.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that one.
That has the Black Box on it. In the composition, eponymous composition, Burning Water. So yeah, that was my introduction to Martin, and through Hank, and we just we played together, and we talked a lot about Martin, and then whilst I was there, I managed to sort of delve into the archives at the Western Front, and there was, because it was quite pioneering in its use of early Sony video cameras, the Portapac. They had recorded a concert that Martin had given at the Western Front in 1980. I think it was 1980 or 81. It was called Ethno-Technological Music. And it's featured in my film, an extract from it. And it's a collaboration between two of his students and Martin. And he's performing on the Apogee motor, which was a custom built, microcomputer based analog synthesizer, or digitally controlled analog synthesizer. And Doug is playing on a Surge, which I think was from, custom built, and then Dan is performing, or the other way around. Dan's performing on the Surge and Doug's performing on Martin's Black Box.
Yeah, that sounds wild. So just to set the stage, the Western Front was like an art collective that started in the 60s or 70s in Vancouver.
Yeah, 70s. Yeah, and it was founded by Martin. Yeah, and it was founded by Martin and a bunch of and a dancer and an artists, and continues to this day.
Oh, that's great.
To give concerts, give exhibitions, and host these residencies. And it has a huge archive.
Yeah, that's cool. I was gonna say you had access to that archive. I know that Martin also taught for many years at Simon Fraser University, right? And they have an archive of his work there as well, or did you get to dig into that?
Right.
Yeah.
So when Martin died, he left his archive to Simon Fraser University. And do you know the composer Matt Rogalski?
Yeah, who's done a lot of work on David Tudor's archive as well.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So Matt and other people helped to collate and collate the archive and put sort of order and sense into it, and did a lot of sorting, a lot of transferring, because a lot of this was on early computer disks.
Right.
Martin was always up to date with the laptops and portable computers of the time. From the first Kim 1 in the late 70s, right through to using the Mac and a PowerBook. He describes using a PowerBook and a Proteus at one point as a portable setup that he used to take sailing with him. And so, it was the key was to get all this, antediluvian software off these computers and archive the material. So Matt was absolutely instrumental in printing out a huge amount of his correspondence that was typewritten, typed on computers, and printing it out. And that's why I could read it all, because because it'd been printed out. And so the film, because there's no, as you said, he's an obscure figure in electronic music. Really didn't get his dues during his lifetime, although he played and traveled a lot and touched a lot of people that are well known and collaborated with a lot of people who are well known, like Don Buchla and Pauline Oliveros and Cajun Tudor. But for some reason, that sort of recognition elided Martin. The film, just to say a bit about the film, it uses these letters as a way of giving a kind of insight into Martin's life. So the letters are from around 1986 to about 1990 to just to his death in 93.
Okay. Yeah. The film's really like intimate and personal and touching. It's a great little document. And I like your I liked your like approach to it. You know, it wasn't just like a, you know, music documentary or something like that. So it's very artistic. And um, so you started putting together the film after you had, you know, went out there and you know, stayed at Hank's place and all that stuff, and then you started working on the film after that, after you kind of discovered Martin's music and learned more about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually my process is, you know, I have like yourself, Greg, you know, you know, we have ideas, and, you know, and we just, you know, maybe write them down, or, you know, see if they're still potent, and someone hasn't done it
Right.
a year on, then, you know, if it's still kind of, you're still mulling it away, you know, mulling away on it, and it's still preoccupying and somewhere sort of fixed there, and in your brain. And, you know, I just felt like this desire, you know, this necessity or desire to find out more about Martin, and to get more deeper into this archive, this legacy.
Yeah.
And which led to the film, and led to ultimately the album that you hold in your hands there. Well, there's also an accompanying CD, which has different recordings on it. The vinyl's more of a sort of scrapbook approach, which really kind of crosses demos and studies and sketches, and the CDs just like kind of finished works.
Yeah.
Longer works, and, you know, includes
the CD. The CD is excellent too. You know, that's a great companion piece to the LP. When I first heard Martin's music, I was just like, how did this stuff like not either get discovered earlier, or why isn't he more well known? And it just like, you know, like the thing that I tell my friends who know about his music, I'm like, why wasn't he on Lovely Music? You know, it's like, makes sense that he would have been like on a label like that, you know, during the 70s and 80s or whatever. And, you know, with that lineup of like, you know, Ashley and Behrman and Paul DeMarinis and Gordon Muma, you know, he just fits it perfectly in with that whole world, you know. And do you think he wasn't as well known because he moved up, you know, to Vancouver and was kind of just tucked away in up there for so many years? Or what?
Yeah, man.
What do you think it is?
Yeah. I can relate to it, you know, being up in Glasgow and being outside in the metropolis of London, and you know, a filmmaker, and a lot of it's, you know, word. It's very much, you know, who you know, and who's in your vicinity, and
right.
You know, he was out, and, you know, it was, you know, although he hosted Robert Ashley and you know, all of these people, he didn't have the same, you know, I think, he just wasn't in the right place at the right time, which was New York City in the 70s or early 80s.
Yeah.
Why he wasn't released by Phil Niblock, you know, on his label, beats me. They really missed a trick in releasing Martin's music. I mean, you know, the other answer to all of this is maybe it was something to do with Martin himself, you know.
Right.
He was so dedicated to the live format, you know, to the live performance, you know, live electronic platform, that he totally eschewed, you know, this idea of you know, releasing final products.
Right.
And you know, it's actually, there's, you know, parallels to Cage in a way, who was not interested in releasing records, as David Grubbs talked about in his book Records Ruin the Landscape, you know. So, you know, he was a composer. He was living a life. He was out. He was into sailing. He was into traveling around the world.
Yeah.
You know, down the hall, you know, I think maybe this is also an insight, was that down the hall from Martin at Simon Fraser University, you had Barry Truax, who was very much an electroacoustic composer with a capital E.
Yeah.
And, Martin sort of describes, that there was a distance between them, in terms of their approach.
Yeah, for sure.
And tape music as well, this idea of sort of containing and making this sort of fossilized object,
Right.
It's the antithesis of live electronics, so he wasn't looking to further his career by releasing records. He was very much into the social activity of making music.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic thing of, a composer he was a composer who his like circuitry was almost the composition, right?
Yeah.
It's not, he wasn't like interested in writing scores or fixing things on tape or whatever. That was the more like traditional route in the academic world. So that makes sense, that he, especially, next to Truax or somebody like that, he probably felt, kind of like the weirdo outsider, doing his own thing, in the other side of the building or whatever. So Bartlett also, like, the other thing that, just kind of preparing for this, like, noticed that he also did a lot of writing too, and was wondering, I'm wondering if there's a possibility that his writings will be published someday, or even just presented online somewhere. The short, liner notes and other things that I've read, like in some of his CDs or other releases, are really fascinating and interesting. Just made me think that I would love to read more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting on a lot of his writing and interviews, and his letters themselves, I think, are so erudite and beautifully written, and he writes with such flamboyance and wit and charisma, and that really comes across. And there's a sort of cheekiness to them as well, this like,
right. I like
that he's kind of dismissive of the introduction of synthesizers and MIDI, and not dismisses of people trying to make money out of it.
Right.
Because he was there at the birth of electronic music, right? With Tudor, studying with Tudor, and so before the synthesizer really existed as a thing, and it was making his boxes, and then his black box, and then and it was all very much DIY, hands-on, and then the computer as well, where this is way before we have DAWs and Ableton and Max MSP and these software languages, which really I'm sure Martin would have been very dismissive of them, because they they assume
MSP
maybe but they assume a way of working,
right
that's very template driven.
Yes. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, he was very involved with and interested in world music, specifically, gamelan music and, Indian classical. I think he studied with some Pran Nath and maybe some gamelan masters, and traveled around and did field recordings and whatnot. So how do you think, like, some of his like world music studies influenced his own music? I know there's aspects within, kind of different rhythmic and tuning ratios that he used, but what else did you kind of discover there?
Well, Martin's his greatest legacy, and perhaps one of his most enduring legacies, was to set up a gamelan orchestra in in Vancouver that
Yeah.
still exists to this day.
Oh, nice.
It's called Kai Madu Sari.
Hmm.
And Martin also kind of set up the first, studies of world music, so to speak, in inverted commas, at Vancouver, and so he, was completely engaged in that, that project of collaborating between the East and the West, and in I think his music is very much informed by microtonality, by the scales, just intonation and different tunings that are pretty much every day, in Indian music, Indian classical music. And so I think the translation of those ideas into electronics, into the possibilities of retuning the synthesizer, and not using it in the traditional way, in a chromatic scale with a keyboard, is definitely one of the connections to that history. And he, what else to say? I mean, he was interested in the social aspects of that music, definitely, and how it involved professionals and amateurs, and brought people together, and brought community together. And I think that goes back to his days in the Western Front, where he set up a performance. He was the first to set up a performance of Cargew's The Great Learning.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there's actually a video of that. Of
nice. Yeah.
Doing The Great Learning, and that, of course, straggled between, broke the division between the amateur and the professional, and blurred that line.
The scratch orchestra.
Yeah. Just another subject to one of my films.
Yeah, I'd like to check that one out. So when did your film come out on Martin? When was that finished?
I think it was around 2015.
Yeah, it's been a little while now. Yeah. So what was the reception for that, and did that correspond with the ArcLight releases, or how did that work?
Reception was fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a runaway hit or anything.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, are to do with duration and scale, and it's a 45-minute film. Perhaps if it had been a feature-length film, that would have got a bit more attention. But yeah, it was this 45-minute film.
It's just in between, like a short film and a feature.
Yeah, it's an awkward length,
Yeah.
And yeah, it was shown in galleries and in film festivals, and we did a piece with Geeta Dayal for The Wire.
Yeah, she's great.
Then Jen approached me about the music in the film, and I shared some of Martin's archives, and that's how we got to putting together that release for ArcLight, which was such a pleasure to do. I mean, the other thing that I should note is that there is also a live version of that process, which was performed by myself and Ernst Carroll.
Oh, nice.
Several venues when like in we did it in Sonic Acts in Amsterdam, and Ernst presented it at Harvard, and I presented it in New Zealand, and it's called Glyphs, and it's a portrait of Martin through his tape collection.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So it It's I think it's around 40 minutes or something, 30, 40 minutes. But it's a kind of a sonic portrait of Martin. It's a companion piece to the film.
Oh,
On the
nice. That's
record.
great. I'll have to check that one out too. Yeah, so I mean, sort of like now that Martin's music's a little more out into the world, and some people
Thanks to you.
some people are discovering, yeah, like I tend to, for Outer Sounds, I usually pick like a recent release or a recent reissue, but for January I kind of like didn't really have anything on my plate, so I was like, I'm gonna dig back a little bit into some releases over the last whatever 5 to 10 years, and just pull something that I thought maybe didn't get enough like notice, and something that I really liked a lot to share with people. So that's how I came across the Anecdotal Electronics LP. And also like Forced Exposure still had like a ton of copies left of it, so I was like,
How many do you need for your subscribers?
I got
50
like
or 60 or something.
Yeah, almost 70 now at this point. So I kind of cleaned them out of what they had left pretty much. So yeah, that was cool. And I actually emailed with Jennifer a little bit too. So we chatted about, the ArcLight label and stuff like that. So she was happy.
What's the future for Jenny? What's the future for Jennifer?
Yeah, she said, she wrote a book, not too long ago about foghorns, and she just kind of said the label, is on hiatus, and not really sure, if and when it'll come back or not. But she's seems like she's interested in other things at the moment, so we'll see. But she was happy to hear that, I was gonna get this record out to a few more people at least. So
yeah, well, thank you, and it's it really makes sense in terms of your oeuvre and your interests, and I think speaking personally as well, coming from this whole modular paradigm, and Martin's really, and people sort of hacking computers and making their own programs and apps and things like that. This Martin's really the sort of granddaddy of a lot of that. Having made this black box modular synthesizer in the 70s that the pleasure to perform on. I can send you the video actually.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that. Yeah, and his music is very
and then collaborating with Don Buchla and and performing with Buchla. So there's, I think, is there some Buchla collaborations on that?
On record? The LP? I can't remember.
On the CD.
Yeah, maybe it's on the CD. I can't remember if it's on here or not, but yeah, and his music's just very compelling. It reminds me more of like David Behrman's music than it does David Tudor's music. Although it feels like there's some kind of overlap there, but it's very listenable and interesting and compelling and unique, obviously. So yeah, I guess to wrap up, what's next for you? What are you working on? And do you think, and then another part of that question would be, do you think, maybe there's more of Martin's music that, might see the light of day at some point?
I hope so. I was, just looking through this document here. It's called Music by Martin Bartlett.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a kind of synopsis of some of his compositions.
Yeah.
Like Response 1980, which was a composition that collaborated with this trumpeter called Louis Ranger. And it was sort of similar to Berman's sort of call and response with a computer and an improviser. And that's something that continues in a lot of his music, like Hexachords, which he was a collaboration with George Lewis, and ATAT, which was a collaboration with the Dutch cellist Francis Marie Wheaty.
Yeah.
And then you have like Air, which I think is on the CD. New Leaves is on the CD. Burning Water. But there are definitely like there's pieces here like Amsterdam Variations from 1985, which has never been released. The Nautical Almanac, I don't think that's ever been released. Perfect Time, that's never been released. And Josh Stevens from the Western Front was working in the Western Front archive, and he uncovered this like an unreleased version of Hexachords, which is like a 40-minute rehearsal, and it's just crazy. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well,
So there's more work to be done in Martin, and I really hope that he ends up in more compendiums and books about electronic music, about the history of electronic music.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll do everything I can to help facilitate researchers.
Help spread the word.
Yeah.
Well, cool. What are you working on these days?
I'm working on a couple of records, and I'm doing this next film is about this Scottish filmmaker from the 50s called Margaret Tate.
Okay.
Who made a lot of cine poems and one feature film when she was called Blue Black Permanent in the early 90s. And so yeah, it's a film that's a kind of portrait of her,
nice.
her work.
Cool. Great. Well, Luke, it was great talking to you, and we're going to try to get your film to the subscribers of Outer Sounds here, so they can see the work you did on Martin Bartlett, and kind of as a nice companion to the music and everything. So thanks for chatting with me, man. It was nice to talk to you.
Nice talking to you, Greg.
Yeah. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.